Hi, everyone. My name is Jess, and I go to school with the snake in my backpack. Unfortunately, for many people, this resulted in unpleasant consequences. But I'll start the story from my birthday, for which my parents gave me a husky puppy. It was, of course, very cute and cool, but I wanted something different. As far back as I can remember, I've always liked snakes. Once, I saw a real snake in a large terrarium at the house of my mother's friend, and since then, I've been constantly dreaming that one day I would also have a snake. My parents were totally against this, believing it would be unsafe. But I didn't think so because a small, non-venomous reptile would definitely not harm anyone. I asked them for a snake for my next birthday, but they decided to do everything in their own way. At first, I even found it fun to play with the puppy, but soon I got tired of walking it for several hours and also tolerating its saliva on my face. In the end, I gave up and sold it to my friend who had always wanted to have a dog for a long time. To the amount that I had received, I added the money that was presented to me, and this was enough to buy a snake and a large terrarium for it through the ad. The owner said that it was a totally safe and easy to take care of. I was totally okay with that, so I flew back home on the wings of happiness. However, my joy did not last long because my parents did not share my feelings. Mom said that she did not want to keep this animal at home, and Dad supported her position. I tried to persuade them that the snake would not harm, but my parents did not want to hear anything. Dad said that he would personally take care of selling it. I was very upset that they did not understand me, but I've already managed to become attached to my new pet and even gave the snake a name, Ursula. All in all, long arguments with my parents did not bring any results. Dad did not change his mind about selling my reptile, and I was so scared of this that I decided to go to school with Ursula. I told them that I'd rather give the snake to someone else. Next morning, I put Ursula in my backpack in a special little carrier and went to school like that. This was the only way to hide Ursula from everyone. In addition, I did not have to worry that while I would be absent, my parents would give the reptile to someone. Fortunately, at school, no one noticed that I brought a snake, so I decided to take Ursula with me every day. But I didn't manage to hide her for long because after lessons, several classmates noticed her leaning out of my backpack. I had to show them my snake completely. Now some of the guys knew that I had such an unpleasant pet. Ursula had caused a real delight because many of my classmates had previously seen snakes only on TV. It was incredibly difficult to keep this secret from teachers because there was a rumor spread at the school that someone was bringing a dangerous pet there. However, the rumor quickly became distorted. All in all, judging from the gossip, this was not a snake, but a large spider. However, there was one problem. Somehow my old enemy, Mindy, reported me to the headmaster. Before, I was kind of afraid of Mindy and her numerous tricks because she always wanted to drive me nuts in some way. But at that moment, when Ursula appeared, I could scare Mindy because she turned out to be terribly afraid of snakes. She stopped bothering me and did not even come up to me without the urgent need. One day after the PE lesson, I noticed that Ursula was not in my backpack. I was gripped by panic because it could not escape from there on its own, which meant that someone had let her out. But that was not the worst thing. If the headmaster finds out that a reptile is crawling along the school corridors, he will definitely call the snake catching service and they will take my Ursula away. In addition, my parents and I will get into great trouble. I was rushing all over the building, looking in every corner, but Ursula was nowhere to be found. Well, of course, searching for such a small snake here is not an easy task, and at some point, I even despaired. The situation was aggravated by the fact that someone still managed to come across a snake crawling along the corridors. Real panic arose at school. Children were rushing in horror along the corridors and quickly left the building. Even the frightened teachers were running past me, and one guy was gripped by panic so much that he knocked me down and did not even notice. When most people were out of school, I continued searching. Soon, I heard someone quietly asking for help. As I ran to the place where the voice was heard, I saw Mindy and could barely stand on my feet. She was lying on the floor, almost unconscious, and her whole face was red. I immediately called an ambulance and stayed with Mindy, trying to figure out what had happened to her. She didn't really tell me anything, and then she passed out. At first, I lightly slapped Mindy on the face to make her come back to her senses. This didn't help, and I put Mindy on her side, opened her mouth so that she would not choke, and began to wait for the EMS to arrive. The medics came very quickly and immediately took Mindy away. At the same time, the principal appeared and took me to his office as a witness of what had happened. There I had to tell him that it was my snake that was crawling around the school. He said that if the reptile turned out to be poisonous, then I would be in serious trouble. After his words, I began to get even more nervous. What if the previous owner lied to me? What if Ursula really was poisonous? I was horrified while imagining a picture of being behind bars because of my own stupidity. Soon, a reptile catching squad arrived at the school. They quickly found the snake and took it somewhere. A little later, my parents appeared as they were invited by the principal. He told them about the situation that had occurred. I lied to them that I had sold the reptile long ago. At home, I managed to hide Ursula in a place where no one could see or hear her. Dad was very angry with me for lying and said that the snake would definitely not stay in our home anymore. I didn't even argue with him because if Ursula was so dangerous to people, then it wasn't supposed to be kept at home anyway. Then the terrible thought suddenly occurred to me that Ursula might have bitten someone else at school, but later it was reported that there were no other victims. And then I remembered Mindy. I was so sorry for her that I sent her a bunch of messages, but she didn't respond to any of them. She didn't even read them, and a terrible picture immediately appeared in my mind. I thought that she had died because of the snake poison. Fortunately, my fears didn't come true. Mindy replied the next day as usual in a rude manner. She said that she had a rare allergy to reptiles which caused complications. She also added that her parents were going to sue me. I immediately told my dad about this, but he was not surprised as he understood Mindy's parents' behavior because their daughter was in serious danger due to my foolishness. A few days later, we received a subpoena. Mindy's parents demanded a huge amount for compensation, which our family did not have. Mom's hair almost turned gray when she saw these numbers. They also demanded that I be expelled from school and registered with the police. This scared me so much that I started looking for at least some evidence that could help us in solving the case, and I found one witness who really helped me. This turned out to be my classmate. On that day, she filmed how Mindy came up to my backpack while looking around and opened the compartment with the carrier. After that, Mindy literally jumped away from the backpack so that it slipped off the bench and fell down, which caused the carrier to turn over inside the bag. Then the classmate with the camera ran away, but apparently this is how Ursula got out and bit Mindy. As expected, this recording helped in solving the case. Mindy first lied about the fact that she just wanted to look at the snake, but then under pressure of our lawyer, she admitted that she had let it out for the sake of revenge. She wanted to see me get scared and start running all over the school looking for my dangerous pet, but she suffered from her own antics herself. She was lucky, because according to the results of the experts, Ursula really did turn out to not be poisonous. The court ruled that both parties were guilty, due to which Mindy's parents were, to put it mildly, not happy, and Mindy herself was literally seething with anger, but she could not oppose the court's decision. As a result, my parents will still have to pay the fine, but it will be much smaller. In fact, my adventures did not end there. My mom and dad said that from now on, I will have to earn money to pay the fine since everything that happened was my fault. My father found a place at his friend's car wash where I was immediately hired. However, there was still one good aspect of this story. The principal decided not to expel me from school, but suspended me and Mindy from classes for 2 weeks. As for Ursula, it was put in a local terrarium. Sometimes I go there and watch how it lives there. The story served as a real lesson for me. Before getting any exotic animal, I will ask permission from my parents and take a more responsible approach to this so as not to harm anyone else. Would you like to keep a reptile at home? Give your answers in the comments. Click on the thumbs up button below the video and share it with your friends. Hey everyone, my name is Leslie. Quite recently, mysterious messages began to appear on my windows, which were left there daily by a stranger. It all started a few days ago when I woke up and saw a sheet of paper with one printed letter taped to the window. I did not pay much attention to it at first, thinking it was my little sister playing with her friends, so I just tore the sheet off and threw it away. The next morning, I saw a new sheet, but with a different letter. It became clear that someone was sneaking into our garden at night and leaving these strange letters. It couldn't have been my sister since she was fast asleep at that time, and it couldn't have been my parents since they had gone on a business trip a week ago. I felt uncomfortable because these notes really scared me. This time, I didn't throw out the messages, but decided to keep it. I also took yesterday's sheet out of my trash can and tried to figure out what the letters on the messages meant. Right up until the evening, I was puzzled over who left me the messages on the window and why to get answers to my questions. I decided not to go to bed, but to wait for the person who was behind this. However, as soon as I left my room for a moment to drink some water, the sheet of paper appeared on the window again, but this time there was not a letter, but a whole instruction. I immediately tore it off and read it. It turns out that these two letters represented two places in New Haven, Yale University, and my school. The instructions said that I had to visit these places in the next 2 days. Otherwise, I would have serious problems. I was a little scared, but I decided not to tell my parents anything yet and not to contact the police as I wanted to figure it out myself. And the next day, I arrived at the Yale University building. As soon as I got to the main gate, I got a text message on my phone from an anonymous person who was probably following me. The sender wrote that I should go to the lantern, which is closer to the entrance, and find a small box. I knew someone was playing with me, and I almost broke my phone out of anger. I didn't want to waste time on anything stupid, so I turned around and started walking back. But I was stopped by the sound of a new message. The anonymous person threatened that if I left now, I would never be able to go to Yale again, which was always my dream. The message startled me, so I went to the lamppost and began to examine it. I noticed that the small box mentioned in the message was half buried in the ground, so I quickly dug it out. It contained a photograph with a circled person. Looking closer, I recognized the man as our literature teacher, Mr. Collins, who had recently been fired from my school. Turning the photo over, I read the caption, "Do you want to be a Yale student? Then follow the instructions." Out of shock and fright, for some reason, I tore up this photo and stuffed the rest into my backpack. Someone knew that I dreamed of going here and also knew that I wouldn't be able to do this if my terrible secret about Mr. Collins comes up. This teacher came to our school a couple of months ago, and many guys did not like him. At once, he decided that our school needed a new approach to learning and introduced his own rules. He was strict, demanding, and uncompromising, even if the other teachers were not happy with him. Because I could not get used to the new technique, for the first time in my life, I received a C. For an essay, Mr. Collins said that my analysis of the character was too superficial, with which I disagreed, as I used to always have A's and B's for such works. This C could affect my academic performance and admission to Yale University because they only need the best students. I tried to challenge my mark, but Mr. Collins was adamant and said that with such works, I can forget about Yale. This angered me so much that I decided to take revenge on him, so I started a rumor at school that he had once been in prison. Also, for the sake of persuasion, I photoshopped a photo of Mr. Collins in a prisoner's uniform and distributed it throughout the school. Since I was a popular girl, they immediately believed me, and many guys began to whisper behind the back of the hated teacher. As a result, when the teacher found out about this room, you are and who started it, he applied to the principal who told me to bring my parents to school. Fortunately, they were on a business trip again, so my grandfather came to him. The headmaster explained the whole situation to him and said that I would have to be expelled because such rumors about teachers are not allowed in school. This meant that I would definitely not be able to go to Yale because of the scandal. However, my grandfather found a way out of the situation. He was able to make arrangements with the headmaster, giving him a decent amount of money. In the end, I was not expelled, and Mr. Collins was soon fired because the school did not need teachers with a tainted reputation. My grandfather and I agreed that no one would know about this scandal, not even my parents. However, besides us, there was a third person who probably guessed why he was abruptly fired. Mr. Collins apparently did not want to let me get away with this situation and decided to take revenge by scaring me with his stupid notes. But so far, I did not have any solid evidence against the teacher to contact the police. So I decided to go to the second place and find out what awaited me there. On the same day, I arrived at the school and I again received a message from an unknown sender. He said to look around the stadium and find a small package. There was a note in the package which said that I must come clean. And on the other side, there was a demand. If I don't confess, I have to pay $5,000 for the silence. Otherwise, my secret will come to light. I didn't know what to do because of the surging despair. I just burst into tears because I didn't have that much money. I came home late at night and went straight to bed, as I didn't have any energy to think or do anything. When I woke up, I found a new message on my window. An anonymous person demanded money, and I had to put money in a trash can next to my favorite pizzeria. I only had $500 in my piggy bank, so I decided to take the rest of the amount from my parents' safe. When I approached the pizzeria with an envelope, I saw Mr. Collins at the entrance. There was no doubt that he was the one who pasted the notes on my window. I went up to him and told him that he was a disgusting person throwing an envelope with money right at his feet. I thought that would be the end of all my adventures, but I was wrong. The next day, Mr. Collins came to me with the envelope I had thrown to him the day before and demanded an explanation. I showed him all the notes and messages on my phone, accusing him of blackmail. However, Mr. Collins, remaining completely calm, said that he did not send me anything. Then he left, promising to help. Mr. Collins wasn't lying. In the evening, he came to me again, not alone, but with a guy about my age. It was his son, James, who admitted that he was the one who passed all the notes and sent me messages because he wanted to take revenge on me for dismissing his father from school, as well as ruining his reputation. It turns out that the rumor that I sent around the school went beyond, and it took Mr. Collins a long time to find a job. Because of this, they had to go into debt so that they would not be evicted from their apartment. James was so angry with me that he decided to play with me at the same time get money to pay off their debts. For the first time, I felt ashamed of what I had done because I didn't expect this stupid rumor could lead to such serious consequences. I apologized to them and promised to help them financially. Mr. Collins said that they didn't need help as he was hired in another city today. Although the whole situation was resolved safely, I still felt uncomfortable with the thought that I had set the person up like that. The only thing Mr. Collins asked me to do was to not go to the police because of the notes so that James would not have problems. And I did as he asked because I felt guilty towards him. What would you do if you were me? Write your answers in the comments. Click on the thumbs up button under the video and share it with your friends. Gun. Now. The mobster is going to get a gun and I'm dead. I screamed so loudly that all the people passing by stopped and looked around. I ran down the street. My name is Lily. Everyone says I'm a very kind and compassionate person. I used to think those were great qualities and deserved to be proud of them. But something made me question whether I should be that kind to everyone. What do you do after class? Let me guess. Go out with your friends, watch TV shows, play a sport, or enjoy your favorite hobby? I, for example, go straight to the hospital after my university classes so that I can devote a couple hours to nursing. My mother is a doctor. She is the one who got me this part-time job and is very proud that her daughter followed in her footsteps and is helping a good cause. My duties include delivering food to sick people, taking away empty plates, taking temperature and blood oxygen levels, and entering data into the patient's chart hanging by their bedside. It's nothing complicated, but I take my job very seriously. I don't want to let my mother down or hurt patients. Speaking of patients, there are all kinds of them, and I don't even mean the state of their health, but rather their character. Some are kind and always say thank you for the food and wish you well. Some are very private and sometimes won't say a word to you. I'm not offended by them. After all, we are in a hospital, not Disneyland, and some diseases do become a real challenge for patients. And then there are those like Mrs. Knowles. Rebecca Knowles was admitted to the hospital after she stumbled on the stairs. For her frail, elderly body, that flight down the stairs had unfortunate consequences. Though my mother insisted that Mrs. Knowles got off lightly with only a concussion and a bad bruise, But Rebecca herself believed that she had not long to live and that she would be going to the other world in a few days. Every time I went to the floor where the old woman's room was, I heard a loud, authoritative voice shaking the walls. "You were not a doctor. You are a mistake. You're not treating me. You're trying to get rid of me sooner. You prescribed me the wrong medicine. Come in once a day. This is not a clinic. It's a torture chamber." And every time I was amazed at how understanding, calm, and supportive the staff at the clinic, and my mother in particular, were towards this impudent patient. I myself could hardly restrain myself from pouring out on her head all the food that I brought to her on the tray. Oh, by the way, Rebecca didn't like her food either. Well, you bet she didn't. "This is not food, it's leftovers," shouted the woman. But when I went back to get the dishes, they were always empty. I guess hunger was forcing our Duchess to give in to the scraps. "How can you stand that lunatic?" I asked my mother on the way home. "Don't you want to tell her to shut up?" Mom smiled back softly. "That's my job, Lily. I have to help all kinds of people, both pleasant and not so pleasant. Doctors can't only treat people they like." My mother's professionalism and kindness forced me to pull myself together once again and pretend as hard as I could not to react to Mrs. Knowles' tantrums. One evening, I walked into Rebecca's room with a tray, and I shrank, anticipating another torrent of scolding and negativity. But the patient greeted me with silence. Rebecca Knowles was lying motionless on her hospital bed, staring blankly out the window. I immediately noticed her face without the usual discontented grimace of an aristocrat who accidentally stepped in horse manure. The old woman was very pretty. It was obvious that her life was clearly not devoted to 9-to-5 office work. But to what do rich people do? I have no idea. I really didn't want to have this conversation with Rebecca, but a strange change in her demeanor made me ask, "How are you feeling, Mrs. Knowles? I brought you dinner." The old woman looked away from the window to the tray of food and then to me. "I don't think I'll have dinner. Thank you, child. Thank you, child." I couldn't believe this mean granny knows the word thank you. My mother will laugh when I tell her. "Come on, you have to eat, Mrs. Knowles." And I thought the conversation was over, so I left the tray on the bedside table and was about to leave when Rebecca grabbed my wrist. She had thin, bony, but very tenacious fingers, like the claws of a bird. "I'm not going home, child. My time has come." "Come on, what are you—" But the patient didn't let me finish. For a moment, there was a familiar displeased look on her face. She held up her other hand, gesturing for me to stop talking. "I want to leave in peace, and in order to do that, I need to ease my soul." Rebecca finally let go of my wrist and opened the drawer of the nightstand and pulled out an impressive-sized pendant with a huge blue stone. "Do you know what this is?" "A pendant?" I shrugged indifferently and was immediately given a fiery look. "It's not just a pendant, silly." Mrs. Knowles beckoned me closer with her bony finger and then began to whisper ominously. "This pendant was given to me years ago by Don Bolognese, the head of the Italian mafia. Have you heard of him?" "Well, it sounds familiar, but I haven't." "Of course you have. At the turn of the 40s, he had the whole town in fear. Everyone came to him for help. Bolognese helped anyone who treated him with respect. But everyone who got help from Don knew they were now in debt." "I've heard that somewhere before." "Be quiet. Where did a dying woman get the strength to yell like that?" I jumped up and didn't make any more comments until the end of the story. "Don Bolognese loved me, but I was unapproachable. My heart belonged to someone else, and then Don gave me this pendant as a sign that he would always be there for me. Don was killed a year after he gave me this gift, and it was because of this pendant that he was killed. Do you know how much this piece of jewelry is worth?" I shook my head in the negative, not daring to say anything more. The old woman laughed and told me the amount. I would be ashamed to say it out loud. So much money for some pendant? I kept my relationship with Bolognese a secret from everyone. You know, ties with the mafia would never allow me to be a part of a decent family. But now I have nothing to lose, and I want to give this pendant to you." And before I could say anything, Mrs. Knowles put the jewel in my hand. "My family cannot know about what you have just heard, but if they find the pendant, there will be questions. Take it for yourself, but be aware that such a gift brings with it great responsibility. Be very careful not to tell your parents. Do not put them in danger. Now go, leave me alone." I don't remember leaving the room and walking out of the hospital, trying in vain to make sense of everything that had just happened. I had forgotten to tell my mother that I left and came back to my senses on a bench in a nearby park. I was still holding the pendant in my hand. Now what do I do? Tell my parents and then together we will decide what to do with the jewelry? But Rebecca had made it clear that Mom and Dad could be in trouble if they found out, and I didn't want to put them in danger. Talk to Mrs. Knowles' family? But as far as I know, the woman's family is vacationing abroad at the moment, and in the 2 weeks she's been in the hospital, the relatives were never able to get back to America. They were probably in no hurry to get back to that devil woman anyway. Get rid of the pendant? But it's worth a fortune. If I sell it, my family will never struggle again. I was distracted from my thoughts by a black car with tinted windows that drove by slowly. When the car came close to me, the window on the passenger side lowered and I saw two men of a very suspicious appearance. Despite the dark time in the day, they were both wearing sunglasses. The passenger turned and looked at me, then rolled up the window and the car drove away. Here it comes! The mafia already knew that the old woman had given away Don Bolognese jewelry. I stared at the pendant and swung it to throw it away into the bushes. But at the last moment, I stopped myself. I couldn't do that. In that case, I'd have to risk my life to save the lives of my loved ones. I immediately recalled scenes from some spy movies my parents and I had not seen so long ago. This was my plan. I'll go home right now, pack my stuff, get all my pocket money out of my piggy bank, and go to the airport, get a ticket somewhere far away, fly in a cell, and then tell my parents where I am and what happened. I will send them the money so they can join me. We will buy a new idea and live in luxury under false names, unrecognized and completely safe. What a great plan! Precise as a Swiss watch. "Can you tell me what time it is?" An unfamiliar voice made me jump and turn around. Standing next to me was a man in a black suit. His hair was slicked back smoothly and his eyes were stern. A real mafioso! "What time is it?" he repeated, and for some reason reached inside the inside of his jacket. "I'm dead. I don't want to help anyone ever again. No way!" I screamed and was confused. The villain rushed home. My cell phone rang in my pants pocket. It must have been my mother. She couldn't find me at the clinic, but I had no time for chit-chat. I was already rushing to the bus stop to get home and pack my things. Luckily, my dad was at home, and no one asked me too many questions as I threw some of my things into a bag and smashed my piggy bank on the edge of the table. I started looking up the bus schedule to the airport on my phone, when suddenly my mom called again. How could I just leave town? My parents would freak out. Even if I showed up in a few days, what they would have to endure not knowing where I was? But what if the mafia gets to them? No, we must all go away together. I put my parents' things in the bag, enough for the time being, and went back to the hospital. I will pick up Mom, then Dad, and from there we'll go to the airport. I found my mother on the floor where Mrs. Knowles' room was. "Lily, where have you been? What's with the bag?" "No time to explain. Come with me." I pulled my mother towards the stairs. "No, please explain. What's the matter? You're not yourself." I started whispering to my mom about Rebecca and the mafia and the pendant I'd gotten, and the reason why we were all in so much trouble. When I finished my story and was about to drag my mother out again, the door to Mrs. Knowles' room opened and an elderly but very handsome man came out of it. When he saw us and the pendant that I was shaking in front of my mother's face, the man rolled his eyes. He turned around and shouted into the room, "Rebecca, you did that circus with the pendant again? When are you going to stop making fun of people?" The answer was that smug laughter of Mrs. Knowles. As it turned out, this was not the first time the old lady had performed this trick with the pendant. Mailmen, nurses, caregivers, neighbors who had fallen victim to a non-existent mobster, some actually left the country. Some returned the pendant. Some had a nervous breakdown. Rebecca would order a new pendant when she saw that the other one was gone, and then she did that cruel prank all over again. I felt like an idiot. I wanted to strangle the nasty old woman with my own hands, but luckily she was out of the hospital in a couple days. What would you have done with such a gift? I'm very interested in your opinion, and I would love it if you give me a like.